Bagley, Harding. Mr. President.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon. Please be seated. This Saturday, we have the Ancient Order of Hibernians annual St. Patrick's Day Parade that goes from 10 a.m. to 12:30. It starts on 15th and Howard. It goes east on Harney to 11th Street, south to Howard Street, west of 14th. There's a website available. Just Google 2023 St. Patrick's Day Parade. It'll show you the route. They said they bounce around on the forecast, 50% chance of rain. Well, I say 50% chance it's not going to rain. So please bring your kids down, bundle up a little bit. And if you want to go support some of the businesses in the old market after that great event that I love going to every year, then I would encourage you to do that and enjoy yourselves. And happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody in the city. Thank you. All right.
Is Bagley Irish?
Yes, it is. Little bit.
Thank you.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of legislative chambers.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Omaha City Council. We appreciate having you here today. We look forward to hearing your testimony on our many items. I'd encourage you to turn your cell phones off or at least to vibrate.
Item 6, to consider a Class C liquor license for Sinful Burger Omaha, located at 14544 West Center Road.
Public hearing and vote on number 6 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? I'm not going to close the public hearing yet.
We do. To the 14th.
There's a motion, a second to lay over and continue the public hearing, mostly because we require applicants to be here, right? All right, thank you. Even have the convenience of Zoom, yes, as some are on today. All right, no further lights. There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Rowe. Yes. Bagley. Aye. Harding. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 7, to consider a Class C liquor license for La Isla Restaurant 3, located at 4835 South 24th Street.
Public hearing and vote on number 7 is today. Proponents, please. Please come down. Give your name and address for the record. Yeah.
Personal address or business address?
Either one's fine.
Edgar DeLuna, and address is 4835 South 24th Street.
Okay. And here to answer questions?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve in a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Aye. Harding. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One public hearing can be held for items 8 through 11 for Class I liquor licenses for Jimmy's Egg Omaha 1, located at 17003 Evans Plaza. Jimmy's Egg Omaha 2, located at 205 North 80th Street. Jimmy's Egg Omaha 3, located at 2904 South 132nd Street. Jimmy's Egg Omaha 4, located at 5106 South 108th Street.
Public hearing and vote on items 8 through 11 are today. Proponents, please. I'm sorry, we have it by Zoom today. Speaking of Zoom, Mr. Hanselman, we'll get you off mute here in a second. We're having a little bit of a delay here. I can hear buttons clicking. We'll see if this works in a minute. All right, we can see you now. I think it's still on mute, though. Okay, there you go. All right, go ahead. We can hear you.
Yes.
Want to give your name and address for the record there?
Jeff Hempelman, 7709 South 73rd Avenue, La Vista, Nebraska, 68128.
Thank you. And here to answer questions, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other proponents on these items today? Seeing none,
No.
any opponents? Public hearings are closed. We do have to take separate votes on each of these four licenses if there are no further delays. Motion and a second to approve item 8. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Motion and a second on number 9. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Motion and a second on number 10. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Motion and a second on number 11. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Item 12, to consider a Class D liquor license for Bottles and Brews located at 10745 Mockingbird Drive.
Public hearing and vote on number 12 is today. We also have the applicant by Zoom. Give that a try. I think maybe you're on mute on your end there.
Oh, sorry. Good afternoon, City Council. My name is Peng Li. My address is 8424 West Center Road, Suite 108, Omaha, Nebraska, zip code 68124. I'm an attorney who represents the applicant. I prepared this application. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 13, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for area at Blue Sage located southwest of 204th Street and Blue Sage Parkway. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 13 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. With me today is Doug Walter of E&A Consulting, consulting engineers on this particular project. This is a 44.5 acre site at the southwest corner of 204th and Blue Sage Parkway. This is right across the street from the Elkhorn South High School. What's before you today is just the preliminary plat. This shows the preliminary plat with 3 lots, essentially 2 of the lots being in phase 1 and the third lot being in phase 2 to be developed down the road. There's a lot going on with this particular site. I'll be brief unless you have particular questions, but it's what you'll see coming down the road will be a rezoning, and it'll be rezoned from ag to R7. There's a number of different housing types. This is kind of an overall general schematic, kind of the master plan, if you will, of the different housing types. And so here in this kind of orange area, it's kind of this direct access or multifamily type housing, if you will. This site over here will be cottages, and I can give you the counts on all of them when I show you the site plan if you wish. And in this particular area, and this particular area down here are townhomes. And then in the middle here are duplexes, and there's a clubhouse with a number of amenities. This will also be a rezone to what they call the Neighborhood Conservation Enhancement Overlay District, and also will have an MCC overlay along 204th Street as well. And so that really just brings me to the site plan, which you'll see down the road is 323 units. Like I said, there's a lot going on with this particular site. This kind of shows the various locations of the direct access units, as well as the cottages over here and the townhomes that kind of run through this area and this area. And then, of course, we talked about the duplexes in this particular area, and this is the clubhouse here. This is Blue Sage Parkway. What they will be doing is extending Shirley Street from the neighborhood to the west to make the 204th Street connection. And so that will be a public street, and all the rest of the streets within the development will be private ways. So the only public street coming through here, which is Shirley, everything else will be private plazas and courts to serve the various units. Really, with respect to the development, it's again low-density residential housing under the master plan, which is 14.5 units or less. This particular plan calls for a density of about 9 units per acre, so it's much less than the 14.5 of low density, so it does constitute low-density housing in this particular location. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Like I said, you're going to see this with the final plat and when the actual rezoning comes to you down the road. But we did have a neighborhood meeting, and everyone seemed to be okay. There was only about 5 people that showed up. It went through planning board without any question, and so we're here requesting your approval.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry,
Yes.
can you give me a start and a finish date on this project?
Assuming we get through this process, we have to go back to planning board on the final plat, and then, so that will be, it's March, so you're probably looking at potentially May, I'm guessing. And then by the time it comes back to this council, it's probably mid-July or so. I think the thought is to hopefully start grading and doing some of the infrastructure work this fall. And I know that the plan is today of building out this entire development as one phase. So the idea is to come out of the ground on everything. So hopefully that won't be a prolonged construction for the various parts of the development. But I would guess it's probably a 2-year build out just because of the sheer number of units involved.
So 2025?
Probably 2025, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further lights? Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 14, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for Cherry Creek located west of 103rd Street and Blair High Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 14 is today. Proponents, please.
Hi, my name is Caleb Beasley with E&A Consulting, 10909 Mill Valley Road, Suite 100. I'm the engineer for the project. This is Zach Jacobson with Signature Companies. He's representing the owner today. This is the Cherry Creek mixed-use development. You can see this is Blair High Road here, I-680, so just west of there at near 103rd and Blair High Road. We are proposing, can this zoom out a little bit?
Yeah, on the top there if you press the button.
I'll just go with this. We're proposing a change of zone to R4, R5, and R6 PUD. The R4 is 7 single-family lots that will mirror the existing homes here from the Avalon neighborhood. And then we have R6 PUD for these multifamily apartments, and then R5 for some townhomes over here. It's a total of 7 single-family homes, 133 units of the townhomes on the individual lots, and then an additional 80 townhomes row house product on this single lot here, with 410 altogether market rate traditional multifamily apartments spread here throughout the project. We did have a public meeting with some neighbors. There was no true concerns other than some traffic issues. And so we've been working with city staff and NDOT regarding this bypass that is going to eventually, they're going to convert this into a 3/4 intersection where there won't be allowed traffic across from the industrial development here to the north and Ida Street. They will not be allowing traffic to go across. We'll be working with the state on the timing of that and how that works along with our project. There will be a traffic signal installed up here at Potter Street, which we will be making a contribution towards that. So that should help alleviate some of the traffic concerns that the neighbors have. We appreciate working with the city staff, just the planning department, with what kind of zonings to use on this and the PUD process, and also Public Works has helped us out with our outfall sewer design. We had some challenges there that we are working through, so appreciate the staff working through. The project conforms to the City of Omaha Comprehensive Plan, zoning regs, and the subdivision regs. It was approved by the Planning Board February 1st, 7-0, and so I'd ask for your approval on this project and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents that want to speak today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Items 15 and 16 can be considered together for Tonac Farms Number 2, located southeast of Pawnee Road and Blair High Road. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 15, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat. Item 16, a resolution to approve the final plat.
Public hearing and vote on items 15 and 16 are today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 17, a resolution to approve an amendment to the 5902 North 9th Street Industrial Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan.
Public hearing and vote on number 17 is today. Proponents, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. Don Seaton, City Planning. This project was initially approved last September for the TIF program. The developers are seeking to amend that approval. Again, it'll be an industrial project, warehousing and distribution, located on a, I should leave this here, located on a site north of the Sorensen Parkway near the airport. The only change really since the approval is they wish to increase the building size from 160,000 square feet excuse me, to 202,000 square feet. That of course increases the project cost, the value, and allows them to ask for more TIF. The amendment's been reviewed and approved by the TIF Committee, City Planning Board, complies with the City Master Plan. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Any other proponents today?
Hi, Jay Lund, 3555 Farnham, Green Slate Development. Like Don said, this has already been approved. We, kind of looking at the site a little bit closer, found a way to add more square footage to the site, so we thought that was a good idea. The building itself increased in size by about 26%, while the TIF only increased by about 17%. Thought that was kind of interesting. So with that, I'm here for questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jay, I wanted to thank you for getting that information over to me. That gives me a overview on your project so that I can communicate that to communities there in North Omaha.
Great.
And just want to say, yeah, you're expanding, and we had already voted on this, and I'm in complete support of this.
Great.
And thank you. Appreciate
Thank you.
that.
Yeah, we're excited to get going.
Okay. And wait, start time, end time?
We've actually already issued some notice to proceed on some surcharging of the site itself. I think you'll see construction start then here maybe later this summer, fall.
Okay. And is that a 2-year project as well?
Probably about 18 months.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yep, thanks.
And then I'm going to give, thank you so much. And then I'm going to give my colleague, Ms. Melton, she likes to vote for my district. I'm going to give her the opportunity at this time to make a motion to approve. There you are. Thank you.
Move the approval. It's a great project.
So, motion and a second, right? Who is the second?
I'm going to let my other colleague do that as well.
All right. There's a motion and a second.
Teamwork make the dream work.
No further lights. Roll call.
Johnson.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Claremont.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley.
Aye.
Harding. Oh, Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 18, a resolution to approve the Second Amendment to the Uptown District Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan.
Public hearing and vote on number 18 is today. Proponents, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning Department. This project was initially approved in 2015. It was revised, amended in 2017. It's a residential development, multi-phase, for-sale townhome project that was to be developed on scattered sites, generally in the vicinity of Park Avenue and Leavenworth. Phases 1 and 2 have been completed. This is kind of a housekeeping measure. They're looking to eliminate Phase 3 and Phase 4 from the project. Phase 3 includes these 3 teal blue parcels. This one's already been approved for TIF as an apartment development, the Diggs, and this one will come back as a new TIF project. The Phase 4 projects sites are the yellow. Those 3 parcels will be eliminated from the plan. 2 of them will be donated to In Common. One of them will be sold off. Like I said, it's kind of a housekeeping measure. We'll see this one come back as a TIF project, and this one has come through already. It's been reviewed by the planning board, complies with our master plan. We ask for your approval.
Thank you. Any other proponents today?
Stephen Held, the applicant, Dow Companies, 11506 Nicholas Street. I can answer any questions you have on behalf of the applicant. Thanks.
Thank you. Other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents?
Good afternoon, Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. As you all know, I'm basically against TIF because I don't think the citizens really get a good understanding of how it works. I drove through that area again today. I used to live in that area. And I, for the life of me, I guess it doesn't say it was blighted, but it probably was blighted somehow. It doesn't look blighted to me compared to a lot of other areas where you're not doing TIF. And I'm sorry, but if it wouldn't get built unless for TIF, then maybe it shouldn't be built. I just think you need to explain TIF a lot better than it's been displayed. There's not enough transparency. How many people that live in that area will actually end up paying the taxes, higher property taxes because of it? And are you or are you not basing a 20-year loan, that type of information, for the builder or the developer? Maybe he owns the property, maybe he doesn't. Maybe you blighted it, maybe you went in and offered some money, and if they didn't take the offer, you use eminent domain. I'm just saying, have a little more debate and explain it, how it works, so that the taxpayer doesn't feel like we're getting the short end of the stick. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents today? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Bagley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. Don, can you come up for a second, please?
Don Seaton, City Planning.
Good afternoon, Don.
Afternoon.
You had mentioned this is just kind of housekeeping that we're doing here today. You mentioned that in common there's 2 parcels of land. Can you zoom in on where those that the city, you said, is donating those to in common, correct?
Well, it's not the city that's donating them, it's the developer who's donating them.
Okay.
But yeah, it's these 2 yellow parcels here. This one south of Poppleton and this one south of Pacific.
Okay, thanks for showing that. I know back in October I met with Christian Gray at In Common, and one of the affordable housing projects he has at 1029 Park Ave. I know there's been a lot of development going on down in that area, and I think it's important for people to know that in common, the good work they do on trying to get, I know LB 1024, I sent a letter in support of $20 million to try to help them. They didn't get it approved, but they're still looking. And again, this is a good long-term development that's been going on down in Park Ave, so thanks, Don.
InCommon's been very active. I think this is the apartment project right here that you're referring to that they've been working on. But they've been very active in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and a lot of behind the scenes. I did a tour of that. It really is that old building that they're doing there. I think it's the Georgia project, if I remember right.
It is.
The work they're putting into that to provide affordable housing units in that area. And they need many more, but that was a good first step, so thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Melton, you're recognized.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to recognize the fact that the TIF project has already been approved. So by opposing what's on today's item, you're actually opposing the reduction in TIF, because that's what is on here.
That is
We're
correct,
reducing
yeah.
the TIF amount, correct?
Yeah, the amount of TIF on the Uptown District is being reduced from 5.08 million down to 3.1 million.
All right, I can't see why anyone would object to the reduction in the TIF. So thank you very much, Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. No further lights. Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearing on agenda items 19 through 26 were held on February 28th. No further lights. Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
We'll need to remove item number 42 from the consent agenda. So first, we will have the public hearings on agenda items number 27 through 41 and 43. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by name, address, and who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent. And I will note that we have Mr. Foles by Zoom for number 28.
Hi, Benny Foltz, Executive Director of Heartland Bike Share, address 1144 North 11th Street, Omaha 68102. Here to answer any questions regarding agenda item 28.
Thank you, Benny. And as long as you are on the mic there, you want to give us a little summary of what that item does? I know it's purchasing 100 new B-Cycle e-bikes, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we the electric bikes in our bike share program have grown in popularity immensely. So this will be an additional 100 to add to the fleet that we already have that moves all over the Omaha metro area. We did about 65,000 trips last year alone, and 95% of those trips were on e-bikes, and only 50% of the fleet was e-bikes.
And then what percent will the fleet be if this purchase is approved today?
Well, the idea would be to create an entire fleet of e-bikes, and this will push us pretty close to that goal.
Great. All with the idea of enhancing and increasing ridership, right?
That's correct. Yeah, bike share with the e-bikes has really shifted in the public transportation section. We're moving a lot of people around on these e-bikes.
Great. Thank you. Any other testifiers on items 27 through 41 and 43?
Sean Weirs, 112 West 19th Avenue, Bellevue, Nebraska. Agenda item number 31. I'm the project manager for BT Underground. I'm just here for any questions.
Great. Thank you. Any other testifiers on these items?
Luis Jimenez, 2709 Dewey Avenue. I want to support item 28, which is adding the additional 100 electric bikes. I think that this is important for the city as we look at multimodal transportation. Heartland Bike Share is a bike share company that services recreational usage, but what they've seen is that people are using them for a variety of reasons. I use it to go to work, and that the system as it is right now doesn't really support that. And so as they add 100 bikes, more electric bikes will be available, not just analog bikes, which are slower and you got to put more energy into it. And so this is important to help them financially so that Heartland Bike Share can have more funds to install stations. That's going to be integral in what Benny is doing, putting more stations in North and South Omaha, which currently North Omaha has 4 stations. In north of Lake Street, there's 4 stations, and then South Omaha, it's about the same numbers. So I'd like to see more stations along Ames Street, and then in South Omaha on 36th Street.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other testifiers on these items?
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I do want to testify against this item, but what other ones did you pull from the agenda?
The only one that's been taken off consent is number 42.
42, and what else?
That's it.
Possibly 42, I'll look in a minute. But I'm against this because I have to ask some questions. I know you probably won't answer them, but for the parking division, we're going to buy a bunch of bikes for the parking division so they can ride around and give people tickets, I guess. This is not for city parks or for close to bus stops so that you can put them on or take them off the big bus, whatever they call that, Orbit. It says parking division. Do we need to spend city money, which is kind of mine, for electric bikes that can only be used certain months of the year? And that much money? Could you not do away with that and do it the way you've been doing it? If it's not for the parking division to use, then who is it for? Do I have to pay for other people's recreation? I don't think so. So maybe you should discuss some of those things and explain it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you said number 40? It's hard to hear you sometimes, Mr. Festerson. Oh, yes, number 40. One of my favorite topics. Omaha Municipal Land Bank is another thing that I don't think people understand, and I'd like to, but we never talk about it. But I'll ask this question. There's 10 nice little affordable houses over west of Saddle Creek where the bridge is over Dodge Street. There used to be a nice big bank there that got torn down, and I understand that the developer on that particular triangular piece backed out. But just a little ways west of that are 10 fairly nice little houses that could be affordable housing for single families. I suppose you could even rezone it to be multiple without tearing them down. Now, what's not clear here is did the guy, whoever's going to build something there, did he pay them a good price for those houses? Or did the city, through the land bank, offer them a deal they couldn't refuse? Or did they take it by eminent domain? Nothing's being done on it right now. It's kind of like the crossroads sitting idle. But those houses are not terribly blighted. I've never been inside of them. But 10 of them in a row but it just so happens it's on the other side of your development along Dodge Street.
So Larry, this is an appointment to the land bank, right? Number 40?
Okay.
Gotta stay on.
But number 40, I'm against the Omaha land banks being involved in it.
Okay.
Yes, they're professional real estate people, but that's kind of against us, isn't it? They are also professional real estate people that assess our property value.
Okay.
So maybe a conflict of interest there.
Any other testifiers on this item, these items? Seeing none, the public hearings are closed. No further lights. Is there a motion? There's a motion and a second to approve 27 through 41 and 43. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
There's been a request from the mayor's office to withdraw number 42. Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
I'm informed that we now have the applicants here in the building that we skipped over on number 6, and I believe there's a willingness by Mr. Harding from that area to reconsider that item and go through the procedural steps we need to get there. Mr. Harding, would you like to make that motion?
Motion to reconsider.
Second.
Motion and a second to reconsider number 6. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Then I'll make a motion to suspend the rules.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
So we'll now have the public hearing and vote on number 6. Is that applicant here? Please come down.
Hello, my name is Amanda Tripp, and I am representing Simple Burger here. I apologize for being 10 minutes late. So sorry, I appreciate your considerations.
Yeah, you bet. And your address too?
14544 West Center Road, Omaha, 68144.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents at this point? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Second.
There's a motion to approve in a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 44, a resolution to approve the list of advertising program guidelines to be considered a binding part of Chapter 21-7 of the Omaha Municipal Code.
Public hearing and vote on number 44 is today. Proponents, please.
Mr. President, members of the City Council, Matt Kalsovich, Parks and Recreation Director. Thank you for the opportunity to share more of the information and details with you about this program. Sent the council information, but definitely want to walk through some things here in this public setting about this opportunity. This represents a lot of work by the Parks and Recreation staff with contribution from our partner groups, working at our sports complexes, providing youth sports activities for the community, some of whom are here today and will have an opportunity to share as well. But I also want to thank the Mayor's Office, our Council Subcommittee, and the Planning Department for their help and support during this process as we've evaluated this opportunity and presented to you what we have today. We had three main goals with our vision about sponsorship and advertising guidelines. First, to create a system that allows partner groups to make community connections. Establish a system that is easy to understand and implement. And third, regulate a system to not have our city-owned parks and field spaces be places for branding, but a complement to community growth and involvement. And the outcomes of this and what we presented to you are what we believe are a roadmap to clear and define sponsorship and advertising, the opportunity to explore new partnerships, and third, a new revenue stream for both our partner groups and the city. An 80-20 split is what we are proposing, very similar to what we have in place with other contractors at places like our community centers and other places we provide partnership programming that will establish the 80% for our partner groups and 20% back to the city. We will, as we did with the evolution of our park rules that you helped us modify and update in 2021, we will provide a report of our findings about the implementation of these proposed guidelines, should this be voted through and passed, to let you know how successful we were, how well things went, where we feel like there needs to be modification and evolution. To go back in time a little bit, this ordinance has been in existence, and there is a model that is currently in place that just did not perform and was not executed on in a way that produced success or ended up being fruitful for the goal of the program to allow for that extra opportunity. And our partner groups approached us about an evolution here, and it was that dialogue and that assessment that is producing what we're bringing to you here today. With that, I wanted to walk through some specifics of the proposed guidelines. And I'll start with the idea of advertising and sponsorship. I know there's some things that I think perception-wise are deemed somewhat interchangeable. For purposes of our guidelines here, we are trying to identify advertising as those partnerships with companies or corporations or businesses looking to make a connection and support the growth of things like youth activities in our community. Sponsorships have a little different element in terms of maybe some things that are going directly to improvements or some of the specific initiatives within some of those organizations. But I still think there might be a meshing or a crossover of some of those ideas, thus they're both being incorporated in here as maybe one concept. Again, working with the organizations was very much a catalyst for this. Currently, as a city department, we have some leverage and latitude to do some things directly with some of our city partners, like the planning department, to execute on some things in the advertising and sponsorship realm, especially in some places where we have an existence of a revenue expectation, like our enterprise programs currently in place. But we wanted to offer the similar opportunity to these youth organizations in particular, and at these sports complexes or sports-specific fields, to also grow their opportunity to provide more for their participants. I'll start with a couple of specific sections. Section 3 under the proposed guidelines, the general advertising guidelines, we did work closely with our planning department, and again, thanks to Director Fanslau and his team for their guidance and insight about the way we could achieve what we're looking to achieve here. And this would be very much contained to and within these sports-specific fields and complexes. I know one of the concerns we heard about the evolution of this, and I mentioned it in our goals, was not to have this be something where it felt like there was this branding or this advertising taking over a park or a public space, and that we would maintain that very natural atmosphere and that opportunity for people to kind of escape some of that, marketing, commercialism, any of those things that we're experiencing in other places of the community in that very safe park space. So this was a specific initiative for those sports complexes. And then one of the things that we also wanted to make sure we spelled out in the guidelines is just that they would maintain the quality and the integrity of those things. There would be, I think, an expectation that from the day somebody was starting a program, let's just say around this time, in late March, early April, and that representation would be there through the length of the traditional outdoor season here in Omaha into maybe late October, even early November, that the banners would be well maintained, these things would be evaluated and monitored. And we wouldn't, I think the really logical and positive step here about what we're proposing is that we're really bringing this together as a more defined partnership. In the previous iteration or the existing iteration of this ordinance, the groups were really left to kind of do their own work with our third-party provider. In this case, we are coming together hand in hand to just make sure that we are helping them support the understanding of the guidelines. We are evaluating those things and giving them feedback and monitoring those things for them so that they can continue to do the great business and provision of opportunity for youth that they've already established. So I certainly wanted to highlight that being one of our main focus here. In Section 4 of the guidelines, some specific the specifics of the advertising. We will actually have a separate advertising agreement with the organizations that want to take advantage of this. This is really just opening the door to additional opportunity, and they'll still make a choice for themselves on whether or not they want to apply this to the inventory of fields that they've been allocated through the city. And then I mentioned the 20% of revenue back to the city, the 80% to the organization. Section 5 is one that I know was a very early focus for us on just trying to ensure that we brought the information to our partner groups and obviously certainly to the council and the community about the limitations on what kind of things could be advertised. I know that was an early community concern that I dealt with very specifically, and we wanted to have this spelled out to limit a lot of the guesswork. And so we've spelled out things in the guidelines in some broad terms, but I think it encompasses the majority, if not all, ideally all of what we'd be trying to mitigate or minimize. Derogatory statements toward the city, derogatory statements toward others, anything political in nature, obscene, vulgar, staying away from firearms, weapons, adult entertainment, nudity, obscenity, alcoholic beverages, tobacco, vaping, anything promoting gambling. So really trying to capture the full scope of, from a city standpoint, what our expectation would be in terms of creating those positive community partnerships and things that we know our community groups, our partners are really going to seek out in terms of making connections to enhance their program and their brand. Moving down to number 8 in the guidelines, the special advertising request. One of the things we know is that we're going to have some lessons learned, and there will be some evolution in this first iteration of this. Again, should it be approved in the form we're presenting it to you. We will have a review committee that will help us really navigate some things in real time as we're trying to launch and then allow our groups to establish these connections. And that committee will be part of helping us, again, try and figure some things out that may not be totally spelled out here, that we would ultimately, if applied and deemed successful, be brought back to the council for an update of the guidelines with maybe some of these things that we've learned or applied through just the function of the program. One thing I will say about that is we have that committee of primarily Park and Rec staff who will be making recommendations to me, but we've also incorporated and very graciously a member of the planning department, specifically connected to the code related to signage across the city. And then we've also made an additional connection with staff from the mayor's office. So we really wanted to bring in a diverse group to help us just see everything from all angles. And as we were being asked questions about expanding the program or diversity or equity of the program, considering all the places we have field space, we wanted to make sure we had good representation in that group that would be evaluating requests or concerns. Number 9, advertising banners. We did a lot of research and legwork, especially with municipalities in the state and the region, about what was being deemed by some of them as acceptable and had been incorporated and adopted as something that they were using as part of their system. And so we have a jumping off point for that. Smaller is acceptable, but we selected something based on that research that is kind of the max. Again, the sensitivity to something so grandiose, it was maybe detracting from the intended use of the space, and so we wanted to have that kind of detail here, and just create some of the clarity for the people who'd be applying this information. Number 10, the preset or fixed fees or value. We did select a max value. Again, we're trying not to create something that makes things more complicated for our partner groups and get into any kind of bidding war or kind of speculation about what the real value is. If people want to come in and include contributions smaller than what we have here as the max, that's certainly something we have deemed acceptable. And there could be a larger chart at some point specifying how certain size of banner or certain representation may be valued differently. But that was a part of the process we thought would be something we could see play out over time and have some perspective as we applied the program, thus the max value, but some of the flexibility under that to have our partner groups work with somebody for a lesser value. And then number 11, going back to the idea of the advertising and sponsorship maybe being a little different in the way that we would be interpreting them as far as this program or these guidelines are concerned. One of the limitations we've had up until now is with corporate signage or corporate donors being allowed to have logo representation in park spaces. And we've had a lot of very generous corporations be part of helping us improve park spaces or have amenities that are now part of what people enjoy on a daily basis at community centers or parks or wherever that might be. And so we've incorporated the opportunity to expand the way we do recognition there. Up until now, we've allowed people to do a plaque. And that has had, in some cases, very small logos and really mostly text identifying somebody or thanking them for their contribution. This would allow some logo use, very similar in the way that we're incorporating it with the sports complexes and the banners and the size of those. One of the parameters with the planning department and what I think has really made this a lot more achievable in the way we're presenting it is that it would only really be visible to the users of that space. So if it were, say, on the ground, and somebody was there using a playground, if there was a contribution that came through, say, a corporation or an organization that wanted that kind of recognition, again, in a size that was reasonable, it wouldn't be the size of the entire playground. It would be something that was identifiable and recognizable, and something, again, that would coincide with their quality contribution or the size of their contribution to help us make an improvement, but be limited to just those people using the space or enjoying that amenity that would then have the direct connection with them being part of what made that possible. And then finally, just number 14, a reiteration about the Advertising Review Committee. For me, that was an important piece of this as a safety feature. Again, I talk about the partnership and us wanting to come alongside our partner groups and the providers we have so that they don't just feel like they're out on their own, having to interpret, having to evaluate. And so we will have that group, as I mentioned, assess some of the things that maybe aren't totally spelled out or that we discover as issues as we're running through this, deal with those in real time. But that will also be a place where we're collecting and reviewing the ideas, the concerns, absorbing and incorporating questions and comments from the community so that then we have a group focused on that to be part of reporting back to me and sharing with you about how things might evolve or change based on what we're presenting here today. So with that said, I know there's some others here who are hoping to speak, but I'm certainly happy to answer any questions now or after that.
Thank you. Appreciate you
Thank
giving
you
a
very much.
summary of that. I think it is important to demonstrate you've thought about all the angles here and where this would apply and not apply as it pertains to our public parks that people care a lot about. So.
Well, and I guess one more thing, if you don't mind, Mr. President, I'll share that detail as well. And that was a great point. We do have Exhibit A of the guidelines where we've identified the spaces, many of which are city facilities run by city staff directly through our department, but then the majority of the ones on the left side of that document are the baseball, softball fields and complexes where we do partner with the youth sports organizations, the partner groups that we have. And so we have very strategically, specifically tried to highlight that so there isn't a question about this permeating out into other places. And what we've highlighted on here too, or made a note of, is this may evolve. There could be some places that we've missed that our groups may challenge us about being appropriate to incorporate. There may be some places where we feel like we'll be able to make these guidelines fit and evaluate perhaps very quickly that they won't work out in the way that we envision. And then Exhibit B spells out a little more of the parameters on the size of the fields that we have and the amount of banners that then would be or could be represented. Again, should these groups activate this as part of what they want to do in terms of their partnership with us, it is an opportunity but not a mandate that they would take advantage of these things. So I will also mention branding or program marketing will not account against this total. Certainly we want people to know who is administering programs and events at that facility, so a partner group can put up their information, if you will, about who they are and how to get in touch with them. We're partnering with them because they're providing what we think is a high quality service and opportunity to develop youth, and so we want people to know those details. And then this is what I would call a conservative approach, and that is strategic in the sense that we did not want to roll something out in this first iteration and have it be immediately perceived as something that couldn't be monitored or handled appropriately. And that was an effort to just ensure the accuracy and structure and the accuracy of the structure that we're establishing as part of this potential program. And as we see things maybe be different, better than what we envision here, and again, this conservative approach, we might present back to the council some opportunities to grow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Any other proponents that want to speak today?
Donnie Johnson, the Johnson Question Foundation, North Omaha Concerned Citizen Foundation. ever since Mr. Jerry Parks relieved the Park and Recreation to this gentleman here, which is doing a wonderful job, I believe there's something else we need to add on to that. Part of Park and Recreation, when I was growing up, and Mr. Jerry Parks and Mayor Lay in those programs, I've noticed that we have lost touch with our 4-H program that we desperately need. So can you add that part of the planning department to the next generation as we alter to bring the state fair back to Lincoln to be a part? Because I've noticed some of the international community young folks enjoy working with livestock. And Mr. C's restaurant gave us the opportunity to study the Black Angus in front of his store, his restaurant, when he purchased it from the 4-H program. So if that's possible, can we make that a part of that? But me and our generation, we got to study with John Glenn, and I'm not sure if that's going to work out.
So, Tony, we're talking about advertising program guidelines.
Oh, yeah, I heard all his programs, but see, before this young man took over, Mr. Jerry Parks had Park and Recreation. He took me to the Kiwanis Club, and I was going to get some money to put some lights at Bryan Center so I could show Brother Wilmot at Creighton Prep how we beat people in basketball. That's okay.
Okay. Other proponents, please.
Jeff Ledent, 13308 Millard Avenue. My name is Jeff. I represent Millard United Sports as the general manager. I am here to talk specifically about goal number 3 that Mr. Kalsovich talked about, revenue stream. I think it is important to understand that the user groups are willing to, if given the opportunity, help create a revenue stream that we can reinvest in our parks. Our parks are aging. A lot of them that we are using, we've been rejuvenating, revitalizing throughout the city. And so I think this is a good first step. I do understand that Matt has taken a conservative approach, and I think it can be managed effectively. We've had extensive conversations over the years about this, and I look forward to the opportunity to kind of help revitalize city parks with this program. I don't think it's anything that will be used in our general funds. It'll be used to reinvest in our program. So, thanks.
Thank you. Other proponents?
My name is Larry Vavracek, 4225 South 121st Plaza. I'm representing the Ultimate Baseball Academy, and we're the program provider for primarily the adult softball contract, which is Kelly and Seymour Smith Fields. And just to dovetail off of what Jeff said, I think, apologize for my nervousness,
Doing fine.
but I think this could go a long way in helping us revitalize the parks. We've put a lot of money into the different complexes over the years, and there's a lot more we'd like to do. I think parks around the area are improving. You're seeing outside of the Omaha area, places like Gretna, places like Valley, and that's no slight against them. Give them all the credit in the world, but they have, some of these complexes have big title sponsorships for big dollars on parks that don't exist yet. And we have good complexes here in Omaha that we could improve if given the opportunity, I believe that. And that would also help keep the cost of those improvements down for our customers, the adult softball teams, the youth baseball and softball players. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Other proponents?
Hi, Darren Obrecht, 2937 South 120th Street, Omaha 68144. Again, just speaking as a proponent of this entire idea. Thanks everybody for all their hard work to getting it to this point. We obviously have a lot of work to do with the parks on a constant basis as they continue to age. We use them, Mother Nature, all that kind of stuff that we get to go. So this will be a great piece for us to get to use. So again, thanks everybody for considering this.
Thank you. Any other proponents that want to speak today? Seeing none, any opponents? I think we have a microphone if you want to help hand that to him, that'd be great. He's getting the microphone for you. I think maybe it needs a battery. Yeah. We'll give him 1 minute here. While we wait, are there any other opponents that want to speak to this item today? Okay. We'll have it here in a second. Looks like we don't have the right batteries. Let's see what else we can do here. Yeah, that'd be great. There we go.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I do. Thanks for the honor, okay? My name is Beshara Rolando Imbeid. I'm a U.S. citizen, grateful. I have an opportunity.
Just your address too for the record, please.
My address is 6032 Ville de Santé Drive. This is Life Care Center of Omaha. I'm in rehab, grateful. I have been pursuing opportunity of trade with Venezuela according to the sanctions, no problem. My ambition is to repeat what we did with Cuba. We sold them $60 million of agricultural product, all according to the sanctions or behavior. I have interests in lower things like a grocery. I have interests and requests of agricultural technology. This is from two influential people on the government. They are not the government.
So, sir, we do need to keep it to this topic, which is advertising program guidelines in the parks, right?
You know, I'm trying to learn what we do, what we don't in this session.
So
how does what you're proposing or speaking about relate to advertising in parks?
See, I did not know what was the objective.
Yeah, okay.
But I need some guidance, maybe hand-holding about how to promote this to the city.
Okay.
To be able to concrete these deals.
Maybe after the meeting, we could have you speak with probably Marco from the mayor's office and talk about economic development. Sounds like that's the area you're kind of interested in.
Hey, my dream.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
God bless.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Okay, any other opponents on number 44? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Matt?
Matt
Hi.
Kalsovich, Parks and Recreation Director.
Thank you. I remember a few community members of District 2, as well as myself, had the opportunity to visit about 5 parks in the North Omaha area last summer. It was at that time that I began to understand the magnitude of what your department does in a real way. And then I remember we did some cleanup there at Kuntz Park, and your department again helped us as we did a community cleanup, and it was very successful. I then asked you at that time, I don't know if you recall, but I did ask to come back with looking for some avenues, some revenue streams to assist you with completing your objectives for your department. So I asked and you delivered, and I thank you for that. And so I will be in full support of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Milton.
Thanks. And Matt, I just want to thank you for all of the time and efforts that you and your department, I know you don't do it alone, but you give a lot of great leadership, and I know you partner with everyone in your department to deliver all these things. And I appreciate all the time and effort you put into this, because once we got it and I read it, I didn't see any amendments to make. And I really appreciate kind of detailing the advertising that won't be allowed, even though it's not limited to just the things in here, because the Parks Committee can still review it and say, we hadn't thought about that, but we can look at it and say that's probably not what we want kids playing baseball to look at every day.
You're 100% right, exactly the intent. Yes.
And the other thing that I don't think, I want to make crystal clear, and as I spent years and years at Lamp Park, the advertising is going to go, when we say 20% goes to the city, the other 80% will then go to like Suburban,
Yes.
who runs Lamp Park, to make the park better for the kids, the people
Right.
using it, make it safer, and those types of things. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. And they are really, and I appreciate and applaud their interest and effort to try and keep access from a fee standpoint as low as possible to, you're right, safety first, but just the experience and the positive outcomes of just beyond what's inherently part of what they're doing with youth sports development in most cases. They're very genuinely committed to that, and that was definitely part of why I was willing and excited to take this on when they asked for more opportunity, because they've proven that over an extended period of time.
Well, and that's why on your Exhibit A, the number of different places that will benefit from this.
Yes.
I mean, in fact, once I looked at it, I hadn't thought of that one. I hadn't thought of that one. I mean, it's a lot of different parks, arenas, pickleball courts, soccer complexes, tennis complexes, the trap and skeet range, golf courses, not to mention all the other baseball and softball fields. So this is benefiting everyone across the city, and in multiple sports and multiple different venues. So I really appreciate all the work, and I think this is a really great thing.
Well, thank you for saying that and for highlighting that, and you're absolutely right. We wanted it to reach as far as it could and show the diversity of where we have people providing programs, and also take into account the equity of ensuring that that was something that was being distributed, and I think this model really achieves that. Thank you.
I agree, and I appreciate all the updates and keeping the Parks Committee that I sit on apprised of everything on a monthly basis, because this is a lot of work, a lot of thought, and I think a great end result. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Begley.
Thanks, Mr. President. Matt, just a couple questions. This is good thinking outside the box to generate revenue. How much are we anticipating maybe generated?
You know, it's hard to say on a total, in the sense that, you know, a lot of it is contingent on how successful the partner groups are. At this point, the cumulative amount here could certainly be in the tens of thousands, you know, or higher, depending on how successful these groups are in making connections. That would be maybe the cumulative amount that they would be collecting. Again, going back to the scope of what's available here, and then that percentage coming to the city. Again, hard to speculate. I'm just glad we have a platform. What we can do moving forward is, once we do maybe have an initial baseline, we'll be able to make some budget projections even more appropriately, accurately, that we have that first iteration of this. And some of that will be an indication here very quickly as I reconnect again upon successful approval here with our partner groups about who wants to take advantage of this. I'm here because a lot of them were anxious to have this, so I'm optimistic and fairly certain most of them will come to us and say, we want to take advantage of this now. So we will see return on this immediately, in my opinion.
So the parks that are listed in Exhibit A, there's several: baseball fields, golf courses, ice arenas, pickle courts. The list goes on and on. So I was curious, like, I'll just throw a couple parks out.
Sure.
Gifford Park, 33rd and Cass, Dolman Park down on 6th and Pine.
Yeah.
The money that's generated from all the parks on this list, if there's a park that's not on the list, do they not benefit from the money collected? How will that work?
So some of the assessment was about being able to achieve what we needed to achieve per the policy or guidelines, starting with the planning code and the visibility of that signage. So if it was so close to residential, or if it was in a place where we couldn't actually put certain things and live within the code, they were unfortunately deemed on the front end of this being out of compliance and not eligible for the improvement. At this point, we believe we have fields and that are part of every partner group's network of fields that have been allocated to them. So everybody's going to have some opportunity Inherently, just because of those regulations, some may have more opportunity than others. And that's what we'll evaluate in real time. If there's a way maybe we can have some creativity and expand the concept. If, say, a park isn't included at this point and that a group who is housed there wants to challenge us and say, hey, if we did that banner here, or we did that advertising here, where it wasn't impacting the community, it was really only focused on the user group's participants, we would evaluate that. But at this point, the model is set up for what it has been, and these are the places that we believe can live in compliance.
Okay, and I see Elmwood Golf Course is on there, but Elmwood ballparks are not.
Correct.
I'll look forward to seeing how this works, and again, I wish we could do it for all the parks, but for the reasons you said we can't. I understand that, but I know there's parks in everybody's districts, and a couple of the ones that I mentioned to you that hopefully there's some way that if they're not benefiting directly from this, that there's other resources that maybe get shifted around to look at those parks. And I know we're investing some ARPA money as we voted the last several weeks. But I'll look forward to being updated on how this works. I really do think it's a good way to think outside the box and generate those dollars. We all love the city of Omaha parks, and anything we can do to support them financially and beautify them, I think that's great.
Thank you. One thing I will add to that is if a partner group has, let's just say 3 of the 5 fields in their inventory where this is available, but they very consciously come to us and ask, even though we're collecting revenue, this facility seems to be in a much better space than this facility that we also have been, given access and responsibility for, we can explore some creativity in terms of how to take our revenue and invest elsewhere, thinking about the comprehensive provision of them working at all these spaces they've been allocated. So I don't think we'd want to limit ourselves. This is a global project, not only these spaces, but if we have a chance to use it in a more diverse way, we'd evaluate that.
I was asking to ask a question on that point too. So it's not necessarily true that the revenue produced at a particular park goes back to that particular park complex. It could be other complexes with that same partner.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And at this point, I think the best aspect, going back to just the new revenue, the investment of the city and the partner groups is happening now. And so the ability to take and add this to that, or be even more strategic or go farther with what we've done, because we're going to have potential, and again, over a couple-year period, probably be able to anticipate revenues on this very strategically and specifically, and set a plan about making improvements. Some of this has been very reactive up until now, and so it just complements a bigger vision on trying to be strategic about our work.
Okay, thank you. And I would just say thank you also to the partner groups that are here today and testified. Thanks for being here, but also thanks for your work and your partnership in our parks, making them better and providing those activities for kids. If there's no further lights, is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 45, an ordinance to amend Section 21-7 of the Omaha Municipal Code to amend the process of advertising in city parks.
The vote on number 45 is today. Is there a motion? Second. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your support.
Thanks.
Item 46, a resolution to approve the professional services agreement with Pale Blue Dot LLC for the Climate Action Plan in the amount of $376,357.
The public hearing and vote on number 46 is today. We'll start with a brief summary from the mayor's office presenting this item, and I know we have the other proponent, or I guess you'd say applicant by Zoom today, Mr. Redmond from Pale Blue Dot. Mr. Floriani, welcome.
Thank you. Marco Floriani, Mayor's Office. Here to speak up and answer any questions regarding this procurement and outcomes or questions about the process, scope of services. This plan was really championed by the Metro Smart Cities Committee, which was the mayor is co-chair of. And in November of 21, there was a resolution 6-1 to support the development of an RFP. It took a lot of time, a lot of effort, but we're here today on a recommendation that the city staff and our technical advisory group feels very strongly about. So happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Other proponents today?
Hi, Will Kirby, HDR, Project Manager, 1917 South 67th Street, Omaha, Nebraska. And also have
Hi, Kristen Veldhaus, 1917 South 67th Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm also with HDR, partnered with Pale Blue Dot, and I'm here for communications.
Great, thank you. Mr. Redmond, is there anything you want to add at this point, or are you here for questions too? Go ahead. Get you off mute here in a second. Okay, try that.
Hello, all, and I'm sorry I cannot be there in person. This just happened to overlap with a family vacation, but I'm very grateful to be here, at least via Zoom, and we are grateful for the consideration of the city. Happy to answer any questions whatsoever about the proposal in response to the city's RFP.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other proponents today?
Well, good afternoon. Scott Dobby, Omaha by Design, 618 South 11th Street. On behalf of the nonprofit Omaha by Design, I'd like to briefly share our support for the creation of the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan and a little bit of our feedback on the process to this point. You know Omaha by Design as an advocate for the city's growth as a vibrant, inclusive, and thriving place to live, work, and play. This vision requires all of us to operate from a future-minded position, challenging ourselves to continue building toward the city we can be for future generations, while also remaining true to the present needs of today's residents. In alignment with this, we support the creation of a climate action and resiliency plan as proposed herein. Omaha by Design was pleased to be a part of this process going back some time now. As Marco mentioned, this kind of got its birth in the Metro Smart Cities Committee. We also assisted as a non-voting member of the Technical Advisory Group. This was the team that was tasked with reviewing RFP responses and interviewing the shortlisted candidate firms. I can say we were really impressed with the quantity, but most importantly, the quality of those candidate firms. And we likewise really appreciated the structured and thorough process that was led in that selection by the city staff. We have full confidence that the team here is well qualified to lead in this effort and that they will do so with significant opportunities for community engagement from residents and businesses and partner organizations like ours. Ultimately, we expect the outcome of this process to be far-reaching, aspirational, impactful, and at the same time, realistic, with actionable steps that we can take today. Building in such a balance will put us on a path of equitable and sustainable growth. It will enhance our city's economic strength through innovation and entrepreneurship, better prepare us to be resilient in the face of future challenges, and further opportunities for the equitable quality of life that both attracts and retains. And so with that, we're grateful for the opportunity to provide our input on the process to date, and we look forward to joining with many more community partners in support of the plan's creation and implementation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other proponents today?
David Corbin, 1002 North 49th Street. I also represent the Nebraska Sierra Club, but I want to point out that as an emeritus professor of public health and also taught energy policy at Creighton University, that this is a long time coming. The American Public Health Association, in which I serve as a governing council from Nebraska for many years, adopted policies recommending such things as you're doing here today. Back in 2015, the Public Health Association of Nebraska wrote their own climate action policy for what can be done in 2016. And going back to the time when I was on the Environment Omaha, when there were over 160 people throughout the city who made recommendations to the city, many of those policies which the city council passed, but many of those are still sitting there. The key element to me for this is the action part of it. I want to point out also that I testified yesterday on LB 560, that asks the state to accept the money from the Infrastructure Reduction Act. If they don't do that, the city of Omaha will be losing out on many things that you could do to enact this climate action plan. Additionally, just a few days ago was announced that the cities of the size of Omaha are eligible for $1 million for the asking with a letter of intent by the end of April, to add to the amount that this contract is for. And if you ask for that and then the plan is implemented, you are also eligible for taking action in this. So it is very important that because of the timing of this, even though it's taken a long time, in some ways it's good timing because of all the dollars that are available to address such things as energy efficiency, active transportation, even parks and greenery are all part of the things that could be funded with that. It can't be funded if the Department of Environment and Energy doesn't ask for it. So I hope very strongly that you are urging NDEE to take part in this, and that the city will submit the letter of intent to add to that $367,000 another $1 million. The last thing I'll say is that in the letter of introduction of the resolution, it mentioned the public, involving the public and developers. It did not mention involving people who are in public health or environmental groups, both of which have been working on these types of things, as I just mentioned, for years and years. They need to be there, and the process needs to be open and transparent. But otherwise, I'm very happy that this moment has come. Thank you.
Thank you. Other proponents today?
Good afternoon. My name's Sarah Cohen, and my address is 15422 Seward Street. I'm here today in support of this resolution. And you might recall this is not my first time here talking about this. Back in September, I was speaking in front of you all because I was concerned about delays, but it is certainly better late than never, and I'm really glad that we're at this point today where you all are getting ready to vote. A lot of our peer cities have already done something like this, and a lot of smaller cities too have already adopted a climate action plan. Our neighbors in Lincoln are already well into the implementation stage. And I think it's great for us to learn from other cities, but also, as I tell my children all the time, just because everyone else is doing something doesn't mean you should. So look at whether it's the right decision, and based on all of the evidence, I really do believe that this is the right decision for Omaha. We are already seeing effects of a changing climate, things like increased and more severe floods and heat waves and storms, and the scientists are telling us this is going to get worse. So it makes sense to be prepared. It's smart to plan to protect our people and our property, and also to be responsible in making sure that we're limiting Omaha's own contributions to the problem. And so that's the why. And then in terms of the how, doing a climate action plan like this has a couple of big benefits. And the first of these is it's about being proactive and coming up with a plan and processes instead of, deciding on the fly how we're going to react to a crisis. And the next big benefit is, too, that we have the opportunity to listen to experts, tell us about what the most effective actions are so that we can get the best return on our investment. This is a smart thing to do. I think it's great that we're doing it, and I hope you all will vote in favor of it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Other proponents, please.
Luis Jimenez, 2709 Dewey Avenue. I'll get right to it, Mr. President. In the letter of interest, Pale Blue Dot's team lead states that our future could be carbon neutral. A key component of a climate action plan is emissions neutrality, developing a pathway to deliver an emissions neutral city by 2050 at the latest. and setting an ambitious interim target and/or carbon budget. This is informed by greenhouse gas inventory from year-to-year data as outlined in Task 4, Greenhouse Gas Emissions Baseline Inventory in the project approach. Two things that pop up to me. During the process of gathering the community-wide greenhouse gas inventories, some local industries will feel exposed, and we should all understand that this will be appropriate work performed for the long-term planning. Second, the Pale Blue Dot team suggests producing annual inventories in support of the analysis for 3 subject years, including 2013, 2017, 2021. I propose that a schedule of 2014, 2018, 2022 to adjust for significant inactivity during the coronavirus pandemic at the height of the crisis, or a 4-year schedule of 2013, 2016, 2019, 2022, basically not using years 2020 and 2021. This is very exciting. We'll need community engagement to realize a unified plan. When Pale Blue Dot submitted their proposal to the bid opening committee, they did so without the benefit of a submittal tool and online portal. This has got to change so that the future RFPs utilize an online portal. You share the purchasing agent with Douglas County, and they have online submissions now. The city of Omaha has an agreement with the Douglas County Purchasing, so perhaps incorporate an online portal in that agreement. Or if the city is going to have its own submittal tool, do make it so that all bids are accepted as is, and the bid opening committee will then need to weed through submissions for the first year or so to collect usage data. With this data, the portal could incorporate other functionalities like rejecting incomplete submissions. However, I don't think there could be qualitative restrictions unless the portal exists as a complex system.
All right, Luis, let's keep it to the
okay, so
item at hand here, okay?
Thank you. I'm wondering about the change of the scope of work that occurred because the mayor announced in February 2015, February 15, that Pale Blue Dot was going to receive the service agreement. So there was a delay, and there was a change of in the scope of work. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. What additional work was asked from the city? And then one controversial thing that I want to add is that minority groups are affected by a variety of conditions, especially climate change. So the Latinos, Black people, other people that are other than white people are affected more by climate change throughout the world. I see that the team is mostly white, so I'd like to see more minority groups incorporated in developing this plan. It sounds like the Pale Blue Dot team is going to look for more organizations to begin, so I hope that's something that is at the top of their minds. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents?
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. I am definitely an opponent. I'm not very happy. But hurry up, because Chicken Licken said the sky is falling. We have to do this right now. But if the sky is falling, why spend the money? Did the federal government come up with a plan? Aren't they telling us they're going to do it anyway? Why do we have to come up with another plan? Why do we have to hire somebody to come up with a plan that's already been decided and it's filtering down through nonprofits on a national basis. And you guys have probably read some of that. It is a national problem. We are listening to nonprofits that not necessarily have Americanism in their pocket. Some of this is anti-American and Marxist, and we need to stop it. What about Biden? What about God? What if God intervenes today? Or let's say a week after you spend all your money? What if the world ends then? Did anybody think about that? Maybe you don't need a climate plan because God has one. On his timetable, yeah. Progressivism has apparently marched forward into Marxism here in Omaha, River City, right here in River City, but also nationally. But people haven't woke up to it yet, pardon the language. There are a lot of best practices we hear about, but they're always best practices by some nonprofit or some university guy, little professors running around with civic engagement on their mind. But it's not civic engagement for citizens like us that are paying the bill. We don't want you people bowing to these climate change things. Don't listen to them. Listen to us. We can't necessarily stop that. If we could stop it, do you not think that our representatives and our boys with the money would have stopped it or prevented it already? You're running around in circles listening to the wrong people. So you should scrap it, throw it away. This is propaganda, and Americans are tired of it. We want a nonpartisan ballot so that we don't have to vote for a Democrat or Republican anymore. And I'm going to submit something today because I think you allowed this gentleman to go off topic. Donnie, maybe slightly. So I'm going off topic and say goodbye. But this is a letter written. This is a letter written. I will not read this to embarrass you. This was a letter written and sent to me anonymously. But what they had to say about the morning edition, Douglas County Board, apparently applies even worse here.
Right.
It's how you treat your citizens. Thank you. I'm done, Pete. Thank you.
All right. Any other opponents that want to speak today? Seeing none, public hearing's closed. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to start, this is a little maybe out of procedurally how we usually do things, but I'm going to start by making a motion to lay this over to April 4th.
I will second.
Then I'll explain why. So last, I guess it was last Friday, after we received this information, the agenda comes out. I had some conversations with Marco. So I went and sat on my back patio, had my favorite cowboy boots on, had a fire going in my outdoor fireplace, smoking a cigar with a couple steaks on my gas grill, thinking about this. And that's supposed to be a little humor there. I heard Don was shaking his head when I started that. That was meant to be a little levity, but anyway, I am serious about laying this over, and I'll try to explain why here with some of my questions. So I think I'll start with Marco, if Marco could come up. And so in our conversation, I think it was we had talked about maybe putting this. It was coming up quickly, and it was determined to put it on now rather than later because I think some council members might be not able to be here on the 14th of March. We don't meet on the 21st of March, and then another council member was going to be absent on the 28th. So that's why I said the 4th of April. And part of that reason is I wanted to make sure that we had the proper amount of time to really look at the information that's been presented to us. Someone said, you know, we've waited long enough for this, and I said I would agree with that, but I also want to make sure we have the time to properly go through the information, understand the response, understand maybe those were not successful in this bid for the consulting fee or the consulting job. So I guess I want to start out by asking, and in our earlier meeting today, I'd asked for some of the information on the other bidders, and I don't know if you were able to get that yet.
I do have it.
So when we first passed a resolution to move forward with issuing the RFP for this, I think we had a budget of $250,000 for the consulting fees to do such a task. Is that correct?
We had a range from $250,000 to $400,000.
You might have the mics a little closer.
It was my understanding we had a range, $250,000 to about $350,000 discussed last year for this plan.
Okay, and then and I know this is not a lowest and best. These are professional services, so there's some flexibility in how we arrive at a certain recommendation for this. And I know rather than explaining the whole process of who's all involved, I'll say that there were a number of community interests represented in that process. But I was kind of interested in what besides Pale Blue Dot that came in at the $376,000, what were some of the other amounts for those?
I have those printed off here.
Okay.
We had one firm that gave us a range, $305,000 to $391,000. We had another firm on the lower end of $300,000, and then we had one that was at $295,000. That price was again lower than others, primarily because of a lower amount on the public engagement side.
Okay, and again, to be fair, so there were 8 respondents. It was shortlisted to 4, and those are the 4.
Those are the 4.
Those are the 4 that you just mentioned. So I would say, and I've been trying to find out a lot about Pale Blue Dot since last week, and going through their proposal, their letter of interest and response to the RFP. And I will say, first of all, Mr. Redmond, I'm sorry you couldn't be here today. I was under the impression that the reason being was for something other than what you had stated earlier, and I really would have relished the opportunity for you or your firm to be here in person today so that we could have some of these conversations as well too. But we're going to make do with the situation on Zoom as we best we can. But quite honestly, I was a little surprised in the response. I felt it was, especially for $376,000, I felt that it was kind of mailed in, if you will. The cover letter was very repetitive of the same cover letters that you responded to for the Dubuque, Iowa response, as well as the La Crosse, Wisconsin response. There are a couple pages where, like, for example, on page 8, and I know some people might think this is a little nitpicky, but this is someone we're going to engage with for $376,000 of our taxpayers' money, and I want to make sure that we're getting the attention of whoever we're going to be doing business with. But the bottom of page 8 is just, it ends with the sentence in mid-sentence with no carry on to the next page. The same thing happened on page 9. And I just find it, I want to be sure that whoever we're going forward with on something like this is going to be a good partner and a thorough partner. And I know there are a lot of functions and outreach that are going to take place as a result of this. So I just want to make sure that I'm comfortable with that. And that's why one of the reasons why I'm asking for we're asking for a recommendation to lay this over until April. But so let me ask you this, and Mr. Redmond, you'll have to give your name and address for the record when you're responding, or Marco. I'll just lay it out to either one of you who wants to take this up. But in terms of the 50-plus relevant community planning efforts that you mentioned, where on the scale, or what project, what city comes closest, maybe in terms of comparable parameters and requirements that are like the city of Omaha's RFP? And Ted, that's probably more for you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's probably more for you. I think you probably could best answer that one.
Okay. So I'm Ted Redmond, Pale Blue Dot, 2515 White Bear Avenue, Suite 177, Maplewood, Minnesota. So thank you for the question, and I'm sorry for any editorial areas that you saw. I will point out that sometimes just responses to RFPs happen on a timescale that's different from our full document creation, but that's not an excuse, just a sharing. So I'm sorry for any editorial error that you saw there. As far as communities that are similar in some ways, I mean, all communities are somewhat similar and all are entirely different, right? I mean, we're always trying to be responsive to what we're seeing in a community. There is a lot of commonality we are doing a regional plan right now that's a multi-county regional plan. Population total somewhere around 350,000, I think, if I recall numbers correct. But that, and it's also a region that has probably what I'm anticipating, very similar sort of mix of community opinions, a range of community opinions and concerns and interests. So I think that is an example. We're also doing work as another team with Hennepin County on a few projects in Hennepin County where the population is larger. But as a large metropolitan area, there is, I think, common potential, challenges and opportunities that larger metropolitan areas have. So I'm not sure how best to answer your question, but I will say that all of the communities that we work with, similar considerations come up, and that is, first of all, trying very hard to reach as many community members as possible in the process. And through as much diversity as possible, so we're hearing a wide range of voices. And we always experience that there's a range of feelings. There's a range of ideas, there's a range of concerns, a range of things that people are interested in or worried about, ideas that they have on solutions. And so that's always, that's a very common experience. And so our approach that we've suggested to the city, which, by the way, if and or when we're approved, that's the first thing that we do is work with our community to sort of go through and finalize the exact approach, how folks are involved, in what way, how do we collaborate, what's the best approach for the city. But I will say with our experience, we find that trying to create the most collaborative approach possible and getting as much input directly into the goals, strategies, and actions in a plan ultimately help achieve the most successful plan.
Okay, so
again, I would say that we experience that in a wide range of communities.
I guess what I was trying to get at was to find a comparable city or community in which you've been engaged to do similar work, and ask, because again, this is much more than what we were probably originally budgeting for this work, and I wanted to know how that compared to the fees that you charge for other communities for similar work. Is it the same? Is it different?
Okay, there. Sorry, I got on mute. Well, it's different from others for certain. I mean, we don't have a set fee that we charge each community. We respond to the RFP, work out a work scope, partner with our partners to determine what the time allocations are that's appropriate for the different aspects of both community engagement, plan development, working with different committee groups within the city, et cetera, and then based on those hours, arrive at the proposed fee. And in this instance, what there is, I think, a very robust, appropriately so, robust community engagement that includes a lot of action oriented around partnering with other community participants and partners. So that's how we arrive at our fee, is just based on the work scope that we think is appropriate that we're proposing.
Okay. This, again, this may seem like an odd route to go down, but, and I know that in the scope of work or relevant work that HDR has done too, it mentioned in their profile and qualifications that it has helped with a comprehensive sustainability strategy that aligns with ESG priority issues. And I know ESG is kind of a hot topic today with what's going on in Washington as well too. And I'm just kind of interested in what your thoughts on ESG and how any of the recommendations that might come out of this might affect the city's ability to sell bonds. I don't want that to be negatively affected, especially when we have a streetcar project coming up. Because as you know, financial advisors, when they're making those investment decisions, they can't not recommend those because of the ESG constraints, right?
I'm sorry, is that a question to myself?
Yeah, it was. I said I was interested in what you think if the end result of this work ends up with, if you will, kind of ESG requirements, and how that might affect the city's ability to market the bonds, any bonds, but especially with the streetcar coming up.
So when you say ESG, can you explain what that is? I'm not familiar with that abbreviation.
Yeah, the environmental, social, and government.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so as far as how a climate action plan may, in fact, I would say, if anything, it's not going to limit your ability to submit for grants. It greatly increases your opportunities to submit for grants.
I didn't ask how it was. I'm sorry, it wasn't asking how it might relate to grants. It's how it affects the marketability of bonds that the city might be able to sell.
Oh, so I'm sorry. I'm definitely not an expert on bond sales. I would have to assume, though, any bond entity that's looking to support environmental issues through, say, green bonds, for instance, I think would only be heightened interest in understanding that a city has a climate action plan, because a climate action plan helps to organize, prioritize, and map out the actions of a community. And I think, in the instance of green bonds, that can only be a positive. But as I say, I'm not a bond consultant at all. That's not a part of what we do.
So let me ask you a little bit about when you're talking about some of the work that you do, you come in and as part of your evaluations, tell me how you use ERSI's Tapestry tool. How does that complement your work?
I'm not familiar with the Tapestry tool that you mentioned.
Okay. Kristen, I'm sorry.
Yes, I can answer that question. Do you need me to restate my name?
Yeah. Please.
Okay, yeah, so Kristen Veldhuis with HDR Communications. So we work with our GIS people to use the Esri Tapestry tool, and that takes census data and other data. I'm not a GIS person, so please forgive me for not using the right terminology necessarily. But ultimately, the output from that Esri Tapestry tool helps us understand the different communities and their behaviors within the city of Omaha. So a good example of that is what's this particular zip code's digital connectivity, or it also gauges what people's political parties are, or it gauges just other census information and other things beyond the census data to help us understand who is in the community so we can reach out better to them.
So it's more for a contact, or is it more for you use the information that, because as I understand it, there's kind of general percentages associated with general tendencies or I guess makeup of those areas and what their interests are, kind of what education, those types of things. So how does that connect with maybe what Pale Blue Dot does?
I would say it more connects to how we put together our communications approach and how we reach out to those specific communities.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I'll probably have some later on too, but one other thing, Ted, I'll switch back to you, is that I found it interesting that maybe I missed other areas where this is brought up, but the one area where it seemed like that there was a recommendation of how to proceed or what route might be taken after all this dealt with solar panels on rooftops in Omaha. And then I see that, as I'm going through kind of the rest of the information that you supplied about your company and affiliates, is that you have something called Pale Blue Dot Solar Group Purchasing Services. Do you care to address that? It just seemed kind of interesting that the one thing you might recommend of all the things that might even be out there as possibilities at the conclusion of this is solar panels on roofs, and you've got an affiliated business that seems to be, in that business.
Yeah, so actually I'm not entirely sure what you mean by the only recommendation as far as future action. We have not made any recommendations for future action. That's the intent of the entire planning process. The appropriate action recommendations. I'm sorry?
That one was mentioned in there. It was specifically mentioned in there.
I think perhaps what you, we do have some pro bono implementation tools that we're offering. One is a solar ready guide, for instance. Another is a guide for high performance buildings, energy efficient buildings, net zero buildings, et cetera. But first, we do not have an affiliate business. We have been engaged by different entities to help put together all range of programs associated with implementing on climate action. The most common is we have been approached by communities through a DOE program, a U.S. Department of Energy program, to support the, communities in developing programs supporting renewable energy. One of them happens to be a group purchase campaign. We don't have any, we're not proposing that as a part of our services. We don't expect it as a part of our services. We do all sorts of work supporting our communities. Our primary focus is in climate action planning and helping communities map out what actions are appropriate for them and helping them to arrive at a prioritization of those actions and giving them a framework that they can move forward in.
Okay. Well, it was mentioned in there, but let me ask you this. So once a plan is set, I assume it's not a static plan. But I'd like to know how's that changed? How's it amended? What's Pale Blue Dot's involvement after the deliverable?
So our involvement is at this point in time wouldn't exist. We have some communities that ask us to help out. We have some communities that we provide pro bono support for everybody. Any of our communities, as they're implementing, if they have questions, ideas they want to bounce off of us, we happily support engagement like that. Some communities have asked us to do certain follow-on services that they feel that their staff need a little additional support. But that's not our primary goal of our engagement. The goal of our engagement is to deliver the plan to support the city. As far as how we do believe that a community should think of a climate action plan as we call it a living document. The reason for that is that goals for a climate action plan are, of course, not just 1 or 2 years down the road, but we're talking, 10, 15 years, 20 years down the road, potentially for certain things. And to map out detailed actions that go beyond, the near future becomes very difficult, because how can we anticipate, any of us, how much availability the city might have for staff time, or what resources might be available, what funding sources might be around in 10 or 15 years. It's very difficult to map out detailed actions over a very distant event horizon. Much like a community will do a comprehensive plan and then investigate the comprehensive plan and make amendments to it on some regular basis, we recommend that the city consider a climate action plan in that vein, so that we would anticipate that you might consider doing some sort of an update at an appropriate pace, whether that's 5 years or 10 years or whatever pace is appropriate to the community. That's one way that it's a living plan. Secondly, providing ongoing sort of monitoring how the actions are being implemented, what kinds of successes is the city seeing out of certain actions, or other actions maybe they're just not delivering what people were hoping for. Ongoing exploration and identification of partners, because the city cannot do this all by itself. The city staff cannot do it all by itself. Successful community climate implementation is a network of partners working together. And so all of these sorts of things end up being something that's appropriate to keep a monitoring of, to review on an ongoing basis. So in that way, it can be maintained as a living plan.
Okay. And I assume in your experience with other communities too, obviously there are probably changes, amendments, modifications that need to be made to existing ordinances for some of the recommendations that might come out of this, I assume.
That's entirely possible. Most plans will tend to have at least a few policy recommendations for an official policy to be adopted by the legislative body, such as yourselves. It might have recommendations for review or potential changes to ordinance or other official documents. And we always make it very clear that, of course, first of all, how a plan is adopted or received by a city changes. Some cities adopt, some cities approve, right? So there's different mechanisms that are appropriate to the city itself, how you actually receive the plan and direct implementation to begin. But one thing that we make clear is that a final plan, its adoption or approval, there might be actions in there that are about investigating modifications to other mechanisms, like the ordinance, for instance, if there was one. Those changes should be understood to need to go through the appropriate city process if something like that is in a final climate action plan. So in other words, having a recommendation of a policy change doesn't make it just automatically happen. We would anticipate that the city would pick up those items that might require appropriate community feedback and review from a body such as this.
Okay. I thank you for listening to and answering my questions. Again, the reason I'm asking for this to be laid over isn't necessarily to say it's not your group, but it's when we just get this information and have a briefing on it for a half an hour this morning. And I have a lot, probably more questions to ask, and I would just feel more comfortable if this was done at a later point in time. So that's why I made the motion to lay it over.
Thank you, Mr. Bigley.
Thanks, Mr. President. Marco, some questions for you. We met this morning, as Councilmember Harding referenced. You said there was, and in the handout you gave us, there was 8 proposals submitted, and then you interviewed 4 of the 8. And I just to be clear, you mentioned to Councilmember Harding and us the range of, again, it wasn't the lowest bid, but what was the range? Can you read those again, of the four that you did interview?
The range was $295,000 to $395,000.
Okay. And of the four you interviewed, you selected Pale Blue Dot. Were any of the four that you interviewed local?
There were local teams as part of the four, and then there was one prime submission of a local vendor.
Okay, and I know with Pale Blue Dot, they're using HDR, which is a local firm, so kudos to them for doing that, at least using somebody local in this contract. We also talked this morning about the price tag of this is $376,357. Just to be clear, there is funds that are reimbursable here from the Department of Energy, correct?
Correct. The Federal Department of Energy does have a set aside for the city of Omaha in the amount of $461,000 to help municipalities adapt climate action and energy strategies and plans. And we have a set aside for $461,000, which we intend to use to pay for this plan.
Okay, so the $461,000 is greater than the $376,357. So this is federal dollars, if this is approved today, that you will submit, if I understood you this morning in our meeting, you'll submit this resolution if it's passed today or whenever, and that will help. You're confident that we should be able to get those federal dollars. Is that correct, what you're saying here today?
I believe a resolution would enhance our ability to secure those funds for paying for this plan, correct?
Okay. And in looking through the handout that Pale Blue Dot gave us, on page 12, I really was glad to see that part of their plan here is to do public engagement, and that's a website, youth engagement, social media monitoring. Those are important. Obviously, if you know, the community wants to be involved in this, and I was curious if sorry, what's the gentleman's name from Pale Blue Dot? Ted. Ted, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Just a couple questions for you. So on page 12, your public outreach with your website, youth engagement, social and engagement monitoring, will you have like email access to the public with this website that you'll have somebody in your team? If anybody's got simple questions just to do outreach, do you have people that'll respond to that?
I see Kristen stood up. I'll let Kristen talk to the overarching of our community engagement as she leads it for our team.
Yeah, so Kristen Veldhuis with HDR Communications. Our website will have a contact us section that will have an email address, just a usual, web form. We can also, put a name and phone number on there. And really, most, if not all of our materials will have some way to have people contact us, no matter what the format is, if it's phone or email or what.
Okay. And this morning, Marco, we mentioned Mr. Tyler. Is Mr. Tyler here?
Jim Tyler, City of Omaha Public Works.
Jim, good afternoon. Thanks for coming down. You mentioned this morning about giving examples of, we were talking about examples. Can you go through a couple of those that we were kind of hitting on this morning?
Oh, okay, so in the meetings this morning, I talked about actionable items that we could see as outcomes of this. I brought up tree canopy. Everyone knows tree canopy is something that we might see as recommended on improving the tree canopy for the city. But I discussed on that one that an actionable outcome would be working with our Parks Department and our Public Works Department to talk about that tree canopy that's within the city right away or in the parks, to make sure that if we're going to increase this tree canopy, is this something that your crews can handle? Do you need additional resources? What's the budget for it? So we need that actionable, that fully understands how it impacts resources on the departments and the divisions that are going to be responsible. The other one that I brought up is something that we're talking about right now, just something that's ongoing. I'm working with Douglas County Emergency Management and the National Weather Service on they're trying to develop some type of enhanced flood warning system that would notify the public earlier in areas to avoid during a flood. And that's something that is, we're looking at an actionable item right now that, again, these are things that I see as the type of outcomes we would want from this type of report. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, that I appreciate that answer. And I don't know if this is directed to you, Jim, or others, but how will we measure the recommendations of this plan? Can you just give a brief answer to how we measure it?
I'm going to have to defer to the consultant team.
Okay.
So if I may, measurement on, so typically the way the plans often get put together is we'll have across multiple sectors across the plan, from everything from energy to building to vulnerable populations, safety, health, et cetera. We will have typically strategic goals, and those strategic goals, we, in all instances, try to make them associated with metrics. Sometimes that's not, that can be challenging to do. For instance, if we're saying we want to increase, community health resilience to impacts of climate change, some of those can be difficult to provide metrics to. But we strive to first imbue metrics at the strategic goal level. And then when it gets into the detailed actions, the steps that are being recommended to be taken to achieve those goals, again, wherever possible, we try to imbue metrics in those actions. So that if there's a program that program suggestions, it might be contacting so many or engaging so many individuals or achieving so many buildings with energy efficiency upgrades or what have you. So that then in the implementation of the plan, the various individuals and departments in the city that are touching those implementations can they know what they need to target in order to be on track with the plan. And annual or some sort of regular updates can be provided back to identify, are we on track or not? So, and then ultimately in terms of greenhouse gas emission, those of course, you can track those through ongoing updates of community-wide and municipal operations GHG inventories, which, by the way, we will be providing the city tools so that you can do that on your own as you desire.
Okay, thank you. The last comment I'll make, I know President Fesserson has been working on this to be consistently working to get the mayor's office to bring this plan forward, and that's what we have before us today. And I do want to say kudos to Mr. President for the work you put in to consistently push for this. And I think the mayor and her team did a good job with the selection we have here today with, again, having a local component that's going to work with them. And I'll look forward to the rest of the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to speak to Mr. Harding's motion to delay this vote for about 4 weeks. I would probably be in support of that. In the last year, well, first of all, I remember in September when Sarah Cohen was up here with a host of other testifiers, pros and cons, and it was a bit of a controversial subject. There are people on both sides of this topic. There's people that are all in, like Mr. Corbin, and then there are people that I hear from in my email that are all out. And so we've got to try to strike a balance in between. Since September, I've tried to do research and try to understand the topic to the best of my ability, not being a scientist, but knowing that one day I was going to have to make a vote. And it is controversial. You can watch a documentary called Inconvenient Truth, and it'll tell you one thing. You can read a book by a scientist, Inconvenient Facts, and it'll tell you something else. And I think what I've been hearing from my constituents as we've had numerous controversial topics in the last 12 months is that they feel like we rush things through without giving them an opportunity for input. And I think a 1 month delay on this is not out of line. I probably came in here leaning toward voting for it, but I do know that when we get briefed 30 minutes, this morning, a half a day before the vote, that doesn't really give us enough time to speak intelligently to our constituents. So I end up having to explain myself rather than, explaining why I voted one way rather than taking input and understanding what the needs of our constituents are. So I don't think it's out of line to push this for a month. I mean, we've been waiting a long time. I understand that. But I just want to get that out there. I think that it makes sense to push this in. And I fully trust the team that did the review work with Scott and the HDR people, and Marco and you guys. That's not the issue. It's just an issue of timing and the ability to get back to my constituents in Southwest Omaha.
Thank you. Ms. Melton.
Thank you. And I would agree. I won't repeat what Councilman Rowe just said because I agree with everything he said just there. I agree. I support laying it over. I agree that I've always proposed we shouldn't have a briefing, the public hearing, and a vote all in the same day. Whether I'm for something, against something, I'm still considering it. I have never supported, even if it's one of my own ordinances that I'm proposing. If I'm telling people that I'm trying to listen to them and I'm having the public hearing and not giving any consideration because I had to make my decision, well, at 11:30, 12 o'clock today when I got the briefing, I just don't think that's necessarily fair. And I don't mean when we're voting on something like a $33,000 contract to remove lead in somebody's property. We do not need to have 3 different votes on that. We don't need to lay those things over. But when you're talking about something like a climate action plan that we're spending potentially close to $500,000, and by the way, that's just for the plan. We're not talking about the cost of implementation of the plan, which I believe we're probably going to be required to implement everything in the climate action plan by the federal government, from what I'm hearing, especially in the most recent Inflation Reduction Act. If we don't, it's my understanding that if we don't pass the climate action plan, it's going to limit our ability to receive federal funds on many things. And then once we have one, if we're not going to implement everything that's in it, we won't get the funds either. So this is definitely something that is being, whether we want it or not, the heavy hand of the federal government is going to force us to not only do this, but implement everything. So I am just a little bit concerned on how we're going to do that. I'm not necessarily convinced right now that I heard the community input is great, but how are we going to use that community input? And how are we, in this plan, are we going to ever consider the cost of the implementation? Because when I looked at some other cities that Pale Blue Dot did, and I looked at their climate action plans, the one thing I didn't see throughout the plans is the cost. There was a focus on, oh, we can create jobs and there's going to be an economic impact, but they didn't talk about any fiscal notes. And so I think that that is something that I would like to see different in our plan than what this consultant has done in other cities. And so to me, I wish we didn't have to lay it over for a month. I'm going to be here at all of the next meetings, but I guess in order to have a full council, to lay it over for a month to make sure all 7 of us are here, I don't object to. But I have no problem laying this over, considering the briefing was just happened this morning. And I have a lot more questions than what I just presented today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Harding mentioned those stakes earlier, and I must not have ate enough for lunch because now I'm hungry. So, I hear my colleagues speak about information not given to us in a timely manner, and it makes me realize how much I've talked to my staff on the city council side and the clerk side and the mayor's staff for that matter on the information we've been given over the course of the last couple of years and the timing of it. I'm glad to hear everybody agrees with me. They're listening. See, they do listen when you say it enough. And I've said it numerous times. I was briefed exactly 7 hours and 15 minutes ago on who we selected, because I'll say we, mayor, staff, planning, public works. These are people I believe in to make the right choice on who we're going to move forward with. So I'll say we. I received less time on a $360 million streetcar and a $650 million skyscraper time and information than I received on this. And I can certainly read and comprehend and make decisions. And I believe in both them projects. Don't take that the wrong way. But this is just a plan. I can't say if I'm for or against anything in this just yet because I don't know what's going to be recommended. But I do believe in those city people that we have in them spots to bring the best company forward. I do have a question because one of my colleagues brought it up, and it was about the funding of this plan. And it says, or he mentioned or asked you, Marco, and thanks for being up there, but you have to say your name and address again, of course, about the eligibility of the Department of Energy grant for this project. And the question is, sure, we're confident we may receive this grant, but what if we don't receive this grant? Where would the funding come from for this plan?
Marco Floriani, Mayor's Office. Thank you for that question, Councilman Palermo. If the Federal Department of Energy funds, it is a set aside, so those funds are currently allocated for the city of Omaha. We just need to accept those funds. And they are designed, or the program was designed to equip municipalities with climate action plans. So that has been we have been set on utilizing those funds to pay for our climate action and resiliency plan.
So it isn't hopeful we'll receive these funds. You're telling me this is guaranteed.
These funds are set aside, and it's reimbursement, meaning we will submit, and then receive those back, not prior.
And just to recap as well, this isn't the lowest and best. This is an RFP.
So it's an RFP, and it is a privilege to be entrusted, as you said, and we appreciate that. Trust city staff and our technical advisory group just to really select the gold standard for Omaha and what we believe for this climate action resiliency plan. Again, it's a climate journey essentially, and looking at the long-term implications of this plan, as well as the benefits of doing robust community engagement. We felt this was the best plan from a city staff perspective, as well as our target advisory group.
Okay, and that group would consist of, say, because when I say we, I mean the city, but that advisory group, OPPD, MUD, MAPPA, Keep Omaha Beautiful, the Med Center. Did I miss anybody?
It was UNMC, MAPPA, OPPD, MUD, and Omaha by Design.
Okay.
And members of the Metro Smart Cities Committee as well, which again, the Mayor's Office co-chairs, the Mayor co-chairs. So those were members of that organization, gave a lot of input in the creation of this RFP, which has existed for now, I think, close to a year, at least in draft form. And then did approve the RFP, the final version of that, before it was posted on October 12th to the purchasing website, and opened up the opportunity for firms to submit.
Okay. And I don't know if anybody thanked you personally, but I want to thank you for your work because I do remember that when you got hired, you took over for Kevin Anderson, who originally started on this process. And I believe because he moved on, that there was a delay then in moving forward with this. And it's certainly not nothing new, because I remember whether it was Council President Festerson by himself or not, but even a couple of years ago, we had some budget amendments, money set aside for this particular item moving forward with this climate action plan. I also can remember voting, having an agenda item, possibly a resolution, that more than once, at least twice, that we voted as a body on the city council saying, hey, this is important. Again, we're not voting on what the particular items are going to be. This is voting to move forward on what them actions may be that we would see in front of us. And it isn't unique. Just a few months ago, we had a housing action plan. And I say plan because we heard from all sorts of people who were against the plan about what we were going to do and what was in that. And those briefings were rushed, but there was a timeline as well. They did a great job. We got all the information we could. But again, that was up against a time crunch for making sure the money was there for a plan in which was approved. So if this wasn't a plan, and it'll be rare that I ever vote against a layover, but because of the support we see and the work that's been put into this, hearing from my constituents as well, of when is this gonna come before us so we can see what's in it. Again, not all of them are for it. That's not the way this works, right? This isn't a job of you make everybody happy. But what I will read you, which is important to me as we sit here representing districts, is we have somebody who represents the whole city. And as I stated, we very rarely get anything on time as of late. But I actually did get a mayor's memo March 3rd, which usually it's 30 minutes before the media would get it. And I'll read to you exactly what this says. It's important for people to listen because this is a person who hears from everybody, not just one particular district. It says, we have completed a thorough process and selected an experienced consultant to help develop a consequential long-term strategy, specifically for the city of Omaha, said Mayor Gene Stothard. This contract supports our commitment to plan for the future. How long do we have to plan for the future? I mean, how long are we going to sit here and talk about this and delay a plan before we actually move forward on this plan? So I want to thank Mayor Gene Stothard for putting out this memo and in her words saying how this is so important for the future of the city of Omaha, because it is to me as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today's corporations understand the value of climate action plan, how it relates to the bottom line as we position ourselves with other competitors. Yes, if we follow the movement of the government on climate action, we would then also know the commitment our government has to making sure that that cities are in alignment to climate action plans. Over and over, we've heard the cost is a factor here. No, it's not a factor here. Cost is not an issue. We have an opportunity here today to make this a wash. And if we make a decision today, now, this would be a wash. Margot has already assured this body that there are funds available to make this a wash. So I don't understand the debate here. Again, the federal government, other corporations nationwide are all looking toward climate development action plans. We are way behind on making this commitment to our city. We're just saying, let's move this along. So there is really not a real reason to delay this any further. Again, Lincoln entertained us with the fact that they had an action plan when they met with us back in October of 2021. So we've been talking about this since October 2021, and here it is, 2023. So I say that we go ahead and move forward with this. There's been some other concerns about how information is exchanged in our processes here at the city. That culture in terms of how we relay information is lacking. But should we stop that process today because of that? I mean, we did a streetcar, we voted on it, we had urgency to make that happen. So do we pick and choose when we want to have good communication, or do we do the right thing for the citizens of Omaha, Nebraska? I'm in support of this.
Thank you. I've been advocating for this for many years, and I want to thank you, Marco, for working on this and bringing it to the council. I'm really pleased it's now here. I also want to thank Mayor Stoddart for her work on this too and bringing this to us here today. I'll take a little bit of responsibility for some of the angst that was described here earlier in terms of process and having this on the agenda item today, this Tuesday. Only in the respect that it's been a year and a half since we started pursuing this. And I know the mayor and the committee made a selection on this quite some time ago, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago. So it was a matter of getting the appropriate paperwork to the city council, and you, Marco, engaged me, I guess it was early this week, to say, hey, we're ready. You know, can we move forward? You want it on the agenda? And I said, yes, with the idea, in my mind, being this wasn't a controversial item, it's nothing new we haven't talked about, and this is an RFP selected by I think a process that was very well vetted. So it could be an RFP that's up or down, but it doesn't adopt any kind of recommendation or any kind of substantive change. It really just starts that process of public engagement over the entire next year. So I didn't see that as a controversial thing, but I will take some responsibility for that. And also believing that the full council would want to talk about this, and as has been noted, the next opportunity for a full council is not until April 4th, given our meeting schedules. So having said that, I do believe, obviously, and I'm supportive of this plan. I do think we need a comprehensive approach that's both measurable and actionable. I think we've done some things in recent years that are very favorable, like increasing our recycling rates and expanding electric charging stations throughout the city. We still have a composting program. I would add to that list our conversion of traffic lights to LED. I think that's been a very positive partnership with OPPD as well. But still, there's so much more I think we can be doing. And I think by adopting this plan, we are eligible then to apply for additional federal funds to help us do that. But I don't think we're ever obligated to do those things or whatever recommendations come from this plan. And I think in addition to taking care of the environment and doing the right thing, in my opinion, I think what this also does is sends the message to young professionals who want to be in a place where sustainability is a core value, and I think that's true. I know you shared that talking point with us this morning too in our briefings, that from your perspective as an economic development advisor to the mayor, this is very important from that perspective too, economic development and workforce. And I'll say, really, there's been no other item in my years on the council that has had more positive engagement than when we talk about environmental issues. We've had scores of young people here talking about these items in our budget process and on other topical items that really show our young people get this, they know it's about their future, and they want to see us take some action. Just a couple of questions for you, I think, Marco. when this process initially started, it wasn't entirely clear that this was a city plan led by the mayor's office. For a period of time, it was working with Metro Smart Cities. They're still involved, as was evident by those testifying in favor today and those participating on the RFP selection committee. But just to make it clear, this process, if approved, is being driven by the mayor's office and will be a city plan, right?
Correct. Marco Floriani, Mayor's Office. This is a city plan. Metro Smart Cities Committee is a regional group. So when we thought more seriously about implementation, as well as talk to other communities, Kansas City is an example, which was a lesson learned, was they would have avoided doing a regional plan, but would have focused on a municipal specific plan. We decided to make this a climate action and resiliency plan for the city of Omaha.
And when we talked about the chosen vendor, I think you gave a good explanation of that process. It was a very competitive process, but I trust and believe you've made the right selection with your selection committee and that it wasn't an extensive process. As described in the documents, the partnership between Pale Blue Dot and HDR as the local partner is about a 55-45 split. Anything you want to expand upon there?
Well, Pale Blue Dot is a smaller company, and HDR being a company with experience working on infrastructure projects here in the region, as well as contributing to OPPD's, I believe, pathway to net zero plan. We felt like this was a good working relationship and one that would move forward with the city would help move this plan ahead and help us keep progress steady, as well as really focus on implementation, which is ultimately one of the factors that I feel lended itself to us coming here today to support Pale Blue Dot assisting with the creation of a climate action and resiliency plan was the toolkits and the resource they would provide to help the city implement this and find ways to fund any specific programs or action items that come from a year of community engagement and data analysis.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for providing the ranges of estimated fees by the 4 finalists there. I think that shows that we are in the right ballpark based on 4 different submittals. They're all independent of each other. And I think part of the reason they are that way is because of the extensive public engagement process you desire, and I think that's appropriate. Talk a little bit about the advisory committee as it currently stands. It conceives of a stakeholder committee and really engaging the public, everyone in the public, of all expertises and opinions in this process going forward, should it be approved.
We envision 3 primary committees or groups with this plan, but we will have a kickoff meeting, assuming we do proceed after today, with the Community Engagement Committee. So community groups as well as individuals will have the opportunity to participate and provide their input throughout the May of 2023 through May of 2024 process, as well as the Metro Smart Cities Committee being involved and continuing to be involved, as well as an action plan advisory group, which will essentially consist of those that were on the selection committee here at the city, others within the city. I mean, this is a cross-departmental plan. There aren't many plans that see planning, public works, parks, and the mayor's office all working together on the content for one plan. But that committee, the Action Plan Advisory Group, would also consist of, again, that targeted advisory group and other organizations here within the city that we feel have expertise within the domain of climate change and resiliency planning.
And if someone wanted to be involved, you'd be the contact person for how that would move forward.
Yes, I would be the appropriate contact person.
Okay. I think that's good, and you explained that well. And I would that point was made earlier about environmental equity. I agree with that. I think that's very important, and that would be an opportunity to make sure that gets addressed, as well as making sure we're including our young people. To me, that's a really big component of this public input that we would hope to see over the next year. You talked about the timelines otherwise already. At some point, it conceives of a draft document that everyone could review as well. A final document comes back to the City Council for approval or not to be approved. But even that document doesn't adopt any particular strategies or ordinance changes. Those will be considered, if they're even in there, at some point later by the council and have their own public hearing and their own discussion, right?
Correct.
I agree with points about having this be measurable and actionable. And Mr. Redmond, I'm glad you talked about that a little bit. And I see your involvement with other communities as very positive because most other communities have already done this. And there's a lot we can learn from best practices and probably what's been implemented other places, even though this will be specific to Omaha. Councilmember Johnson mentioned our summit with the Lincoln City Council about 2 years ago now, and it was evident they were much further along than we are, and in fact have already adopted their plan. And they have some aspirational goals in that plan. I think their overall aspirational goal is to reduce carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. I would hope that we would have some aspirational goals in our plan too, but I'm also very interested, probably even more interested, in what we can do in the short term and what we can do from a practical perspective as a city. When we talk about things like fleet maintenance and street lights and our sewer policies and sewer facilities and biosolids and making buildings more energy efficient. Mr. Tyler mentioned tree canopy in our parks. To me, these are very practical things, and many things that, if done well, save us money, in addition to being a good environmental policy. So you mentioned the funding already. I wanted to talk about that, but I think you have not only a high confidence in the funding source for this, but it's basically reserved for the city of Omaha should we proceed and you just get reimbursed by it, right?
Right.
I think that's very favorable too. And by the way, that's up to $460,000 as I understand it, which is more than this proposal.
That is correct, yes.
The last thing I would say then is just that, it's my preference not to delay any longer too. It's been a long time coming. And this is also just the start of that process over the next year that would include all kinds of folks. I think the RFP selection was done well and was exhaustive and vetted well. So I hope we do support the mayor and approve this yet today. But if not today, in the very near future, because this does need to get moving and I think should be a priority for our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've just got one quick question, I think, is, Marco, is there an approval process to accept the federal funds that would pay for the hiring of the consultant? You mentioned that it's sitting there waiting for us, so is it, why aren't we making these kind of on the same agenda? If there is there an approval process that has to come before this body to accept those funds?
There's not. We felt a resolution would help our request for accessing those funds for this plan.
I'm sorry, could you start that again?
The application hub,
Yeah.
the federal application hub for these funds, does ask that if you're utilizing these funds for consulting services, they do want to see a contract as part of your submission to receive those funds. So we thought it was in our best interest to have a resolution as well to move forward with Pale Blue Dot in order to, before attaching a contract, as part of that application process, if that makes sense.
Okay. So, and that will come before us at some point then, or not?
We do not have the funds, the federal funds, request that if you are utilizing those funds for consulting services or be using any of those to pay for consulting services, to attach a contract between the municipality and that vendor. And so that's why we are here seeking support to have Pale Blue Dot provide those services, and we can attach the contract when we draw down on those funds. We can receive the drawdown of those funds.
Okay, let me ask finance. Let's see or maybe law. Would that be something that would come before this body to approve the acceptance of those funds?
Matt Kuzi, Law Department. My suspicion would be that these federal funds that are being referenced this afternoon would be similar to like grant money that we receive and that the council routinely sees on its agenda. Basically being able to accept the grant money and authorizing the mayor to sign the agreement for the grant. So I think that would be the best suspicion in terms of how this would go, and so that would come before the council if that's the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's no further lights. There was a motion and a second to delay to April 4th. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo.
No.
Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
No.
Motion failed 3 to 4.
Is there a motion to approve? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 4 to 3.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 47, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a purchase order to Swarco Reflex LLC for pavement marking beads.
Public hearing on number 47 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 48, an ordinance to approve an agreement with Rick Bond for stabilized sewage sludge services.
Public hearing on number 48 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 49, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 43210 in its entirety, approving a PUR district for property located southeast of 70th and Haskell Streets. Planning Department recommends approval.
Public hearing on number 49 is today. Proponents, please. So we're talking.
Donnie Johnson, the Johnson Equestrian Foundation, North Omaha Concerned Citizen Foundation, 4928 North 52nd. I was just wanting to share something with Mr. Rowe, my dear friend from Central Park Elementary School. 22 years now.
As long as it's about 70th and Haskell Street.
It is.
Okay.
That's the other part. We all know about the Constitution, right? Everybody's name's on there. But there's one guy, John Hancock. His name stuck out different, but they all signed the same. So sometimes I deliver it different, like John Hancock. That's okay. In the meantime, Al Gore, been the president.
So Donnie, this is about a planned unit development at 70th and Haskell Street, right?
I was going to ask Mr. Rowe a question, though, if it's possible.
You can't ask questions, and that's got to be on
Oh,
that
I'm
topic.
sorry. Well, then, is it true that they're not paying Al Gore no more around for global warming?
All right, you're off topic, please. All right, thank you.
So I was trying to figure that out. Is that
Any other proponents on number 49, please?
Oh, okay.
Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 50, an ordinance to amend Section 1 of ordinance number 42916 to correct a typographical error. Planning Department recommends approval.
Public hearing on number 50 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed.
Item 51, an ordinance to approve a major amendment to mixed-use district development agreement for North Streams located at 20111 P Street to allow auto repair services. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 51 is today. Proponents, please. Thanks for staying with us.
Hey, my name is Billy Green Jr., 17725 Katy Freeway, Houston, Texas, 77094. Also, my engineer.
Good afternoon, it's Brad Keel with Bishop Engineering in Des Moines, Iowa, 104th Street, 50332. Here for any questions, both of us. And I don't know if appropriate, since this is a second reading, if we can request a waiver for third reading at this meeting or not, and a vote.
We cannot request waivers, but if the hearing's today, you wouldn't have to be here next week if there aren't any questions.
Okay, thank you. That's
You're here all the way from Houston and Des Moines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here and welcome to Omaha.
Appreciate it, thank you.
I'll now ask for any other proponents that want to speak. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Looks like you're probably in the clear there. Thanks for coming. All right, next item.
Item 52, an ordinance to approve the Square Apartments tax increment financing agreement.
Public hearing on number 52 is today. Proponents, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, Don Seaton, City Planning. I'm here for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any other proponents?
Mr. President, members of the council, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the redeveloper. Just here to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Nope.
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. Well, it looks like we'll be going all the way up and down Leavenworth on the bus. Here's another building with I'm opposed to because of TIF. My comment on this is, as with other things, this is really decided before it ever gets to the city council, like today for a public hearing. So why do we waste the time? Why don't we have it all the hearings at one time on it? Because this is decided at a planning department meeting, not the city council meeting. Yeah, you guys need to vote and then the mayor maybe signs it, but it's a done deal before it ever gets to. So let's save your time and effort and money and devote that to another channel to make some better improvements. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents? Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. I will point out for the record that this is the redevelopment agreement. That means that it is based upon the redevelopment plan, which has previously gone through both the planning board and city council. And in essence, it basically codifies everything in the plan into an agreement. And if there are any major changes from the plan to the agreement stage, maybe that's why it might appear that even though today is the public hearing and next week would be the vote, if there isn't a lot of comment on it, it's because that has already taken place at previous stages of this development.
Agreed. Multiple public hearings on this item over the last 6 to 8 months and an extensive review process even before that. Thank you. Next item.
One public hearing can be held for items 53 and 54, ordinances to accept the bid of Nebraska's Best in the total amount of $27,370 for grounds maintenance work at Bryan Park and in the amount of $57,620 for grounds maintenance work at Willowwood area.
Public hearings on items 53 and 54 are today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. I'm sorry, Ms. Melton.
That's okay. I just want to quickly say thank you for this additional investment into the Willowwood area. They often feel that they have a very unique setup that we don't see very often, and there's common grounds that go throughout the entire neighborhood. If you've never been out to Willowwood, between 120th and 132nd off Blondo, it's a very unique layout for a neighborhood, and the city is in charge of all the common grounds all the way throughout, including 2 parks. So this is something that is very needed, and it is a kind of a neighborhood in our city that is challenging to keep up with the upkeep. So I know that people in Willow would really appreciate this, and I'd invite any of you, if you want to see this unique area, to drive out and drive through Willowwood at some point. I'd be more than happy to meet you and walk around with you. You can't. You absolutely lots of cul-de-sacs.
We'll need you.
Yes, I got it down, and I'd love to bring you.
All right, thank you. Next item.
Item 55, an ordinance to accept the bid of Chopper's Lawn Service in the total amount of $50,200 to provide grounds maintenance services for the El Dorado subdivision.
Public hearing on number 55 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 56, an ordinance to approve an agreement with Armor Up America to provide mental health resources to support the city's public safety employees and their families.
Public hearing on number 56 is today. Proponents, please.
Kristen Cavill, City Benefits Manager, here to answer any questions you might have.
Deb Zander, Human Resources Director, here to answer any questions you might have.
Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. I'll also note, just for the record, we received a correspondence from Local 385 in support of this item, and I know it's very important to our first responders. Thank you.
Item 57, an ordinance to establish a Class B oil district located at 8425 North 114th Street.
Public hearing on number 57 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 58, an ordinance to approve an interlocal agreement with Douglas County for the joint use of the City of Omaha tow lot.
Public hearing on number 58 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents?
Is this the one about the sheriff suing the city about that? That's not that?
No. All right, public hearing is closed.
Non-action items, items 59 through 78, do not require public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Second, roll call.
Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Harding. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 4:50.